The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our slightly delayed June, but improved June webinar on maximizing your workplace benefits. See, we have a few attendees here already, but waiting for about 25 or 30 more. So I'm going to give everybody about 2 minutes to join us, and then we will get started. Thank you, everyone. All right, well, we have most of our scheduled attendees, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we'll get started now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our slightly delayed but much improved June webinar on maximizing your workplace benefits. We are thrilled to have you here with us. I'm Dave Clayman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 12 Points. Many of you know me. Many of you know my partner, Francesca Federico, and Manny Frangidakis, as people work on your retirement plans as well. So we are joined today by Dan Hill. Dan is a member of an organization which is a great partner of ours, Employee Benefit Solutions. Dan, I know it says a little bit about you on the screen, but could you tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Yes, I work for EBS. We're a small boutique, independent employee benefit firm, and myself, I've been here for quite some time. I work with employer groups on group benefits. Work in a strategic fashion on designing plan designs, communicating benefits, educating employees, and I've been doing benefits for quite some time, and I'm happy to share some of the tips and things to think about when it comes to your employee benefit plans.
Awesome, thank you, Dan, and that was a really great reason for us to add Dan and have him as a great resource for this webinar. So on our agenda today, it's pretty broad. We're going to move pretty quickly, which is good. I speak fluent, quick New England, so we're going to cover 401ks, 403bs, so general retirement plans, health savings accounts and FSAs, flexible savings accounts, health and dental insurance, and then a little bit quickly on restricted stock units and stock options for those of us who have those available to us and maybe get lost in the alphabet soup of benefits. So briefly, many of you may know us for the 401k or 403b retirement plan. Benefits of a 401k: if your employer offers a match, that is free money. You absolutely want to get that. If your employer offers any kind of a match in your retirement plan, even if it's not a 401k or 403b, it's a simple IRA or something like that, make sure you're taking advantage of that. It is free money. I know it can be painful sometimes to put that money away yourself, but if the employer were offering you a 3 or 4% raise, you'd certainly take it. So whenever we work with the CFO of a company, I always tell them the moment they're going to hate me is when they look and see how much of their matching dollars they're going to have to spend, because we're going to do our best to get all the employees to take advantage of that. Tax advantages. So if you are contributing to a 401k on a pre-tax basis, you're going to have the opportunity to put in, let's say, $5,000 a year. If you're putting that $5,000 into your 401k and you were making $50,000, you're now going to be taxed on $45,000 in the current year, not on $50,000. So that's one of the places you can take advantage from a tax standpoint. By the way, if you do have questions, we will be monitoring the chat, so please feel free to ask any questions through the chat and we will answer them if they arrive. Lifetime contributions.
I don't think the slides are advancing.
I see that. I don't know why. Give me 1 second. This is why they don't usually put me in charge of slides. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry.
If you have dual screens, it may not be on the right screen.
Alrighty then. It said there was. Hold on 1 second. Does that? That's not moving it. Okay, 1 second. I apologize. 1 second. I'll pause that for 1 second and see if we can improve that. All right, let's try this one more time. All right, let's see if this rolls through now. Is that, those slides are changing now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. That's why they don't usually put me in charge of slides. Sorry. Okay, so lifetime contributions. It does put you in the regular position to be saving throughout your lifetime, and that seamless saving habit. I say to people all the time, I'm a terrible saver. I have this habitual thing of buying cars. So forcing myself through the 401k to save money is a great tool. You do have a Roth option. If you don't and you're running a company, you may want to consider it. If you don't and you're involved in a company, talk to your employer. The Roth can be a great tool. The main difference, again, if you're doing pre-tax, I talked about earlier, the ability to put money in now and decrease your taxes, but you'll pay taxes when you go to take the money out in the future. If you have a Roth option, you're going to put that money in now. You're going to pay your taxes on those dollars now. And under current law, that money is going to grow tax-free for the rest of until you take it, just until you choose to take it out in retirement. So really an individual question as to which is most beneficial for you right now. I would say generally, because of the power of compounding and wanting to get more money to work quicker, that you want to take advantage of the pre-tax unless you get to the point where you're maximizing your total contribution for the year, which is about that $20,500 level for 2022. So that's really, and I see the question there about should you split it? You can. It's not the worst idea in the world, but we call that tax arbitrage. But again, the ability to get more money to work, I prefer pre-tax right now for most people. But again, feel free to reach out to one of us and we can talk to you one-on-one after the fact and give you a little personal advice if you'd like. Shelter from creditors. So retirement plans are federally protected. God forbid you should get into an accident, hurt somebody, any kind of a judgment against you, you're a medical or legal professional and you have any kind of a judgment against you, your retirement plan, your employer retirement plan is federally protected. You do get advice, monitoring, and quality assurance, whether it's from us or whomever the advisor on your plan may be. You're getting kind of group research as opposed to just doing it yourself. And then lastly, and most importantly, you are building for your future. What about inflation? Isn't it better to pay taxes later? We'll talk, I can answer that, but I'll hold that one a little more towards the end if you don't mind. Saving up, this is that power of compounding I was just talking about. So this is one of my favorite slides to show. We're going to assume these two people, Joe and Phil, both get the same return over time. So there's no return distortion here. Joe and Phil get out of school. They're 25 years old. and they're hanging out, and they both just got a job. And Joe says, wow, retirement, Social Security is such a mess. We really have to start saving. I'm going to start putting $5,000 a year in. What about you, Phil? Phil says, man, the pandemic just ended. I'm having fun. I'm going out to the seaport every night. I'm getting my Starbucks coffee in the morning. I can't give up $5,000 a year. So fast forward 10 years, Joe now has a family. She says, oh, I have to pause. I have to stop my 401k contributions because I've got a mortgage and a family and people to take care of. Phil says, oof, I'm way behind. I'm finally getting started. He says, I'm going to start putting in that $5,000 a year like you were. Joe never gets around to putting her any more money back in again. So she is just where she is with her $50,000 that she contributed. Phil contributes from age 35. He feels like he's behind the entire time, all the way through to age 75. He puts in $5,000. He puts in a total of $200,000 compared to Joe's 50. As you can see, he never catches up. That's the power of compounding. Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. And that's really a great opportunity and a key thing to save as early and as often as you can. So one thing I did want to touch on, sorry, is you do want to save about 10 to 15% of your salary ideally over time. I know that sounds like a lot. Yes, when we give those numbers, we do include an employer match in there. So if your employer is matching you 3 or 4%, now you're talking about saving anywhere from 6 to 11% on your own. Again, sounds like a lot, but you're going to work for 30 or 40 years and then ask that money to support you for the next 25 after that. So that's a really important piece. And if it's a lot to get started, start out with 4 or 5%. And then every year as you get a raise, just add another 1%. It's a great way to look to maximize. One of the biggest missed planning opportunities we see, people think they contribute to a 401k and then they cannot contribute to an IRA. You can contribute to an IRA after your 401k is maxed out. However, it will not be tax deductible. It doesn't mean you don't get the advantage of that tax deferred growth for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So a very valuable planning tool that many, many people think they are not eligible for because they see the phase out of the deduction and don't realize that they still can contribute. Qualified plan savings limitations. Unfortunately, many people can't get to that 10 to 15% because there's a limit on how much you can contribute at that $20,500 level. So how do you work around that? That's where you look to your IRA. For 2022, those limits, $20,500 in a qualified plan. Another $6,000 could be contributed to an IRA. Your maximum compensation limit for matching contributions is $305,000. And then also, if you're looking at Roth IRAs, this is another thing that's missed. Roth IRAs have a maximum income you can make in order to contribute at all. So there we see if you're single, head of household, it's $144,000. If you're married filing jointly, it's $214,000. Roth 401ks do not have an income limitation. So even if you're making large dollars, you can still contribute to a Roth 401k. Healthcare planning. I'm gonna ask Dan for a lot of help here. So key things on healthcare: having health insurance. Obviously, it's required in the state of Massachusetts, and hopefully Dan can help me with that. Regular doctor's appointments save you money in the long run. It's not something I'm fantastic at either. So I'm gonna learn something from the webinar myself. And then of course, COVID planning. So Dan, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about just broadly health insurance for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're all see it in the news. Health insurance continues to increase year over year, the one thing I would say is preventative visits. Remember, with the Affordable Health Care Act, preventative services, regardless of what type of plan you're on, as long as you're in network with your health plan, should be covered in full. So you really want to make sure that you're having your screenings, having your preventative visits. There should be no financial barrier for that. Early detection on many, diseases is important. It's going to, save your life and save you money, right? If you can cost avoid later procedures or surgeries because you've caught something early, not only, number one, is it going to, like I said, save your life, but also, financially protect you as well. So again, just make sure that you're having your preventative visits with your primary care physician And I know for young people it's tough and we feel invincible, but again, having an established relationship is really important. When it comes to COVID planning, what we've seen during the pandemic, unfortunately, is a lot of people have missed a lot of their scheduled preventative services. Now that we're kind of, well, I wouldn't say we're through the woods here in the pandemic, but certainly doctors' offices are open and available. So if you haven't had your screenings, things like colonoscopies that I know are not fun, or mammograms, or these really important things based on your age or pre-existing conditions, you want to make sure you do that. That's really important. So I would just kind of stress that in terms of your healthcare planning.
Awesome, thank you. And then a little on HIPAA here. So HIPAA provides data privacy, security provisions to safeguard your medical information. Anyone involved with any of your healthcare information, personal data, is required to follow these provisions. Provides for continuous health insurance coverage for individuals who change or lose their job. That's COBRA. And I'll probably have Dan give me a little help on that as well. Improves access to long-term care services and health insurance. And then really important thing, especially when you're talking about if you have young children who may have become adults, it's important for you, but really people miss it for their kids. You want to have a HIPAA release in conjunction with your healthcare proxy. We see it all the time. Parents have their kids go off to college. Oh, they're still on my health insurance. This is great until they're 25 years old. However, if something happens to them while they're away at college, unless there is a HIPAA release, you do not have any right to find out any medical information about them or make decisions for them. So HIPAA releases, healthcare proxies for your college-age kids can be super important and is one of the most oft missed things we see.
Yeah, I would add here in terms of your continuous healthcare coverage, if you have a loss of coverage because you lost your job, if you work for an employer who has 20 employees or more, you're covered under COBRA, which is a federal law. If you're working for a small employer, many states have, like Massachusetts, have put mini COBRA in place to protect you so that you have sort of something to model the federal guidelines. So just because your employer may be smaller, it might not be, you may be still eligible to continue that coverage. When it comes to COBRA coverage, if you're not, if you lose your job and you haven't, found a new job to pick up other group health insurance, you may want to look at the state exchanges, because COBRA is going to be a continuation of your coverage, but you're going to pay the full premium rate of that coverage. So if it's a really low deductible plan, it could be a rich plan in design, you could be over-insuring yourself at that point, paying more premium than buying a plan that might be more appropriate for your coverage through the exchange with a higher deductible and larger copayment. So something to consider too. COBRA is great to continue your healthcare coverage, but it might not always financially be the best solution.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. And then these are really your slides, Dan, so I'm going to let you take a run with these guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon consumer-driven healthcare. Consumer-driven healthcare is really important. We have seen, obviously, our deductibles, our health plans become more complicated, and it's really a transfer of, one of the biggest things that drives down premiums is your deductible, right? Your deductibles on your plan. Most people have a deductible. 25 years ago, we had just co-payments on our plans. Now we're seeing deductibles and co-insurance. So one of the things to think about when you have these health plans, consumer-driven health plans, is being a consumer, right? It's really difficult with the lack of transparency. We really don't understand what things cost. Many times we just show up and we get a bill later in the mail. Well, with consumer-driven health plans, it's pushing employees to be better consumers, shopping out services, if you will. With higher deductibles, just like auto insurance, right? I'm going to pay less in premium typically. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing to have higher risk. It's just understanding that risk and how can I financially put myself in a position to share that risk or make sure I'm insuring myself against that risk. So and we can go to the next slide as well. When we talk about deductibles, they're typically, they begin on the beginning of your plan year and they run through a 12-month period. There's two different types of deductibles. Most deductibles are what we call embedded, meaning if you're on a family plan, not one individual will go through their individual deductible, but then there's typically an aggregate deductible that covers the whole family. Non-embedded deductibles, these are what we see right now with qualified high deductible health plans, and these are deductibles that you just need to be aware of, that one person can exhaust the entire family. So there's that risk when you look at high deductible health plans, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. Different ways employers are trying to help employees with funding these deductibles, right? If I'm an employer, why would I want to pay a fixed cost for a low deductible if I can save 10, 20, 30% by essentially raising my deductibles up? Well, then I have to think about my employees and retention, right? If I raise my deductible up $10,000 on my employees, probably going to have a hard time keeping employees there. So what employers have done, if they've come up with different mechanisms to help people pay for those deductible expenses when incurred. It gets a little bit more confusing as a consumer, but these are going to reduce your, your benefit premiums that's coming out of your paycheck. So HRAs are a popular vehicle that a lot of employers are doing right now, where basically an HRA is funded by your employer. It's employer money. Only employers can contribute. They can decide in the HRA what is going to be covered. So many times it's the deductible or a portion of that deductible to help you. So, if you're going through open enrollment or looking at these plans, understand these HRAs are really there to help you as an employee. The biggest, trend that we've seen in the last probably 6 years are health savings accounts. Although they've been around since 2004, health savings accounts are really a great tool, a financial tool. They're tied to a health benefit, but it's really a financial savings vehicle to help you pay for medical costs either now or later in life. And the tax advantages are incredible what are offered, and I'll talk in more specifics. But don't be scared necessarily of your HSA plans with your employer. They will be linked to higher deductible plans, but again, the financial benefit of an HSA can easily outweigh some of the risks that you might take on with a higher deductible. Flexible spending accounts. This, many employers offer flexible spending accounts in both healthcare and dependent care. This is an easy way to put money aside to pay for things that you're paying for already today, but do it tax-free, right? So if you have daycare expenses, that's easy. Why not pay, why pay, taxes on those daycare expenses? The IRS has opened up a lot of the over-the-counter items that are eligible. So again, you may be already spending money on copays and deductibles with taxable money. Why not do it with tax-free money that's allowed by the IRS? And I'll talk a little bit more about the FSAs. So yeah, again, the health reimbursement arrangement, I talked about this. They're funded by your employer, typically in junction with a health plan that's going to have a higher deductible or some sort of higher co-payments. And again, you want to just pay attention to what that HRA is actually paying for and how they're paying for it to see if that might make sense. Some employers actually roll over some of those HRA dollars too. So if you're not using them in that health plan because you've had a low cost year, you may want to consider what the rollover benefit could be in future years. Flexible spending arrangements, as I said, essentially what you're doing is you're making an election into a plan that is divided among your payrolls, right? So if you put $2,000 into your FSA account, it gets divided through your payroll, typically coming out pre-tax. The one thing to be careful about, these are spending accounts. You want to have a plan to spend that money, right? You don't want to put money aside and max these out and then end up at the end of the year with $2,000 of money and saying, oh geez, I need to start buying and stockpiling on Band-Aids and over-the-counter items. That's really not what they're designed for. So think about how you spend healthcare throughout the year. Many times you can go back to your health provider. They can give you a list of how your claims have been spent, how your utilization is, and you can apply those dollars so that you have a plan to spend those deductibles and copays. they are use it or lose it, as we say. So the IRS doesn't allow employers to give you that money back. Sometimes you'll see rollover, or excuse me, limit maximum limits of 570. That's what the IRS has now for 2022, where if as long as you spend down to 570, you can roll that over, but not every plan has that. So you really need to understand your FSA plan on what grace periods are and runouts are. And again, the IRS is defining this list. FSAstore.com, honestly, is a really great place to go if you're trying to figure out eligible expenses.
A great tip. Thanks, Dan.
Mm-hmm. And again, I kind of talked about these. The healthcare FSA really designed for healthcare expenses, dental, vision. When it comes to dental, it's non-cosmetic. It's going to be, a dental expense. Certain over-the-counter items, again, you want to check that out. The calendar year maximum this year is $2,850. That's been getting indexed every year about, by $50 or $100. So unfortunately, on the other hand, dependent care, we haven't seen the maximum move over probably the last 20 years. The maximum you can put for dependent care is $5,000. I have 4 kids at home. I certainly blow through $5,000 of daycare expenses by March. In fact, even my summer camps right now, cost me $5,000 alone. But again, I put that money aside because, I know I'm going to spend it, and why not, why pay the taxes on that? So it's typically up to children for age 13. That's the other thing you want to be mindful of. And the other thing you want to be careful of with dependent care accounts, you don't want to put your money into the dependent care account unless you have daycare expenses. So at open enrollment, I see a lot of people put money into these accounts and their kids aren't even in daycare yet or a summer camp. Starting daycare or starting summer camp is a qualified event to then put the money in the account. So you don't have to do it necessarily at open enrollment. Because what happens if something changes? And we saw this, unfortunately, with the pandemic. A lot of people put money in dependent care, and then guess what? The day camps never opened, daycare is closed down, and people got stuck, putting this money in here.
Apparently, Dane may have had a bad experience. Just said, important note that overnight camp doesn't count, only day camp. So I apologize if you had a bad experience, but thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I did see the other question, Dane. I will get to that.
So let's talk real quickly about the HSAs. HSAs, as I said, is a very powerful financial vehicle, but unfortunately, HSAs are linked to high deductible health plans. The only way you can access and contribute to an HSA is by being enrolled in a qualified high deductible health plan. And qualified means that the plan must have a deductible, minimum deductible, and that deductible must apply to all services first. And these plans are great because they do offer lower premiums typically, and with that premium savings, I encourage employees take that savings and put it into the HSA account, because the HSA account, that money, unlike an FSA, is not use it or lose it. Once you put money into an HSA account, you own it. You're the custodian of that account. You own it. It's a bank account in your name, right? Employers many times help employees too by putting money into these accounts. When an employer puts money into that account, it's 100% vested, right? You take that money with you. If you leave the employer, there's no risk of losing it. The great thing is, like a 401k, you can make employee contributions throughout the year pre-tax. You can change these employee contributions throughout the year too. So if you run into a little extra money with a bonus, or you can put that into the HSA. You can also make post-tax contributions as well outside of employee contributions, which you can write off at the end of the year when you do your tax returns. And the beauty of these HSAs, many of them have the ability to put into some sort of investing option.
And I'll steal a little thunder there. So HSA is often even more powerful than retirement plan for saving for retirement. If you can afford not to spend the money out of your HSA and you can save in there, that money is going to grow tax-free. So your 401k is growing tax deferred. This money is going to grow tax-free. So what we often tell people is fill the bucket on your retirement plan up to your employer match, then go fill your HSA. Then if you have leftover dollars, go back to your retirement plan. Because if you think about it, the average couple is going to spend $200,000 on medical care in retirement. you need to pull $200,000 out of your retirement plan at a 30% tax rate. In order to get that $200,000, you're pulling out, $330,000 roughly. If you need $200,000 for healthcare out of a health savings account, you are pulling out $200,000 because it's coming out tax-free as long as it's used for qualified medical expenses. So huge opportunity to save and invest it there. You often can mirror your own retirement plan lineup. You're going to see some similar things. I saw one question. Someone said, I have an old HSA with high deductible healthcare through my spouse. Yes, you can contribute to your HSA. You also, if you have a high deductible health plan and your employer does not have HSA option available for you, you can open your own HSA as long as you're covered by that high deductible health plan.
Yeah.
So great opportunities there.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of what some of I've already covered, and Dave has already mentioned. These are triple tax advantage accounts. Money goes in tax-free, money makes tax-free interest, and comes out tax-free for qualified expenses, which is huge, right? Just like any other account, they're inheritable as well. If it's going to a spouse, it can go into the form of and still keep its HSA. Any other sort of beneficiary, I believe it, you probably have to cash it out, but nonetheless, it's not lost money. We can move on to the next slide there. Yeah, so as I said, unused funds roll over year to year. That's the whole purpose of this account, is to build up a reserve, right? We want to, I advise a lot of people and educate them about these vehicles. While you're not using, maybe you don't spend a lot of healthcare today, or you're, like Dave said, maybe you can spend a little bit out of pocket. You're able to afford to spend a couple of, $100 out of pocket and leave that money in that account. It's like kind of like your 401k. You don't want to take money out of that account while it's earning interest, right? So if you can leave it in there and sort of maximize that, then when you do need healthcare cost, you can actually, take the benefit of that. If you do need a distribution before age 65, you could take it out. But like many accounts, you pay a penalty, a pretty hefty penalty. And if you're using it for a non-qualified expense, you're paying the taxes on it as well. After age 65, there's no penalty, but if you're using the money for a non-qualified expense, you're still paying the taxes. So the IRS dictates how these high deductible health plans have to be structured in order to be qualified. They also dictate the index limits, which do change from year to year. But as I said, for HSA holders for 2022, you can put up to $3,550 as an individual. If you are covered on a non-individual policy, so an employee plus one, an employee plus spouse, employee plus children, or a family policy, that allows you to put up to $7,100 in for families. And there is also that catch-up provision. So if you're age 55 or older, you have that additional $1,000 you can also contribute. Right now, the minimum qualified plans have to have that $1,400 deductible for an individual and $2,800 for a family. And they also cannot exceed these out-of-pocket. An out-of-pocket expense, what that is, that's the most that you're going to pay out of pocket on a health plan. It's your real threshold, and your deductibles, any co-payments, anything you're paying out of pocket accumulates to that maximum. Once you hit that maximum, then the health plan pays 100% of the claim. So that's what an out-of-pocket maximum is. For 2023, this is probably one of the biggest jumps we've seen in the ability in these index contribution maximums, which is awesome. So, for 2023, you're able to put now $3,850 as an individual and $7,750. So these have climbed these typically have ticked up about $50 an individual, $100 a family. So this is a big jump this year. Also the minimum deductible plans that qualify are $1,500 for an individual, $3,000 for a family, and the out-of-pocket maximums ticked up a little as well. But again, these are great opportunities to take advantage of it. When you think about a contribution to an HSA, you do want to be careful because they are prorated on how long you're on the health plan. They do have a very confusing rule called the December rule. So if you are enrolled partially for the year, and it's no later than December 1st, as long as you're funding the full amount in the next year, then you can take advantage of the prior year. Your funding of an HSA falls on the same as a tax year as well. So you have up till the federal tax limit to fund the HSA completely as well. But the December rule, just keep that in mind. If you're joining mid-year, that the way you're funding it really depends on your future and the following year participation. Can you transfer an IRA into an HSA? Yes, there is that one-time transfer rule, and you'd probably want to speak to your advisor, of course, about doing any of those transactions. And can you withdraw funds from the HSA at any time? Yes, you can. Again, you just want to be mindful of whether or not those are qualified expenses. If they're not qualified, it's prior to age 65. There is a penalty tax that's pretty sizable. So, do you have to track your expenditures for your HSA? Yes, you are required. If the IRS comes knocking and they're going to ask about an expense on or distribution, you want to make sure that you have the documentation to back that up. You're not, many times with an HSA account, you get a debit card and it's going to look almost like an FSA card, right? Or like any debit card you get from a bank. You can swipe that at any sort of terminal. You could walk into Best Buy and use your HSA to buy a 55-inch television. Now, what's going to happen is if, the IRS might ask you about that distribution, about that cost. If you're in an audit, you want to make sure, that you have the receipts to back up the qualified expenses. The other interesting things with HSAs,
television purchase.
Yeah, the other thing with HSAs is there's no statute on when you can reimburse yourself for an expense, which is kind of cool. When I was younger and I was in an HSA plan, I didn't have a lot of healthcare expenses, and I was able to build up a reserve. And if I did have a healthcare expense, I just kind of saved the receipt, put it in a shoebox. I paid that out of pocket. If I ever need to reimburse myself for that expense, I can do so. So that was kind of another neat feature. And if you are enrolled in a high deductible health plan today and you're contributing and you're no longer on that high deductible health plan moving forward because you lose coverage, you can still use that HSA to spend for your tax dependents, for yourself, for future healthcare costs. You just can't contribute. So that's the big part of it, right? The high deductible health plan gives you the opportunity to put money into that account. But once money goes into that account, then you can use it for qualified expenses moving forward.
Awesome. So thank you, Dan, for all that. And I know we're running a few minutes over, so I'm going to continue to be a little bit quick here. Taxes impacting growth, distributions, benefits, and more. You have less to invest due to taxes. Here are some taxes that have the biggest impact in your financial plan. Our top federal tax rates of 37% and 35% for long-term capital gains and qualified dividends. So just knowing what your tax rates are, opportunities to reduce those taxes through your employer via HSA, via retirement plan. Your Medicare payroll tax, if you're earning more than $200,000 or $250,000 if you're married filing jointly, you're going to pay 2.34% in Medicare payroll tax. And then your net investment income tax, again, over 200 individual, over 250 married filing jointly, you'll pay a 3.8% net investment income tax on any investment income you receive, interest, dividends. Restricted stock options and restricted stock units and stock options for those who may have it from their employers. What is a restricted stock unit? It is an award you receive from your company to represent common shares of the company's stock. They typically vest over a period of time contingent upon your employment. They do result in taxable income at the time of vesting. Generally, you often get a 4-year vesting schedule, so each year of the next 4, you will be eligible to sell 25% of your grant. If employment terminates for any reason, then you typically forfeit your unvested shares or stock units. Why is the benefit? It is a gift to you, awarded at no cost to you. Any tax is deferred until those shares vest. As I mentioned, once they vest, they do become taxable. At vesting, you own shares of the company at the current fair market value. So if you get these granted to you, and now 4 years down the line, the company stock is $50, and you got 50 shares, boom, you have $2,500 that was kind of a gift to you. They don't expire once they have vested, so you can hold these. If you had worked at Disney and you owned Disney stock for 50 years afterwards, you could have held those restricted stock units. The vesting is predetermined when you are granted the stock, and they always have value equal to the current fair market value, whether the stock goes up or down. So if you get granted when the stock is 15 and it goes down to 5, you still own those 50 shares at 5 as opposed to 15. So someone just asked if you're taxed at vesting and at sale. So yes, you're taxed on the value of the share when you vest, and then you're taxed on any additional capital gain when you sell it, or if it's a loss, you would get the benefit of the loss. So yes, taxed on the initial gift or award, and then taxed again on any capital gain at that time. Yes. What are some of the limitations? Shares are only transferred to you in accordance with the vesting period given. While you're when you're not vested, you can't sell, trade, or transfer them at all. The taxable event occurs on the predetermined date based on the vesting schedule. So maybe you don't like where the tax rate is in any given year, but that's your vesting date. That's when you're going to have taxes. You can't control when that income is realized. And then withholding a portion of the vesting shares to cover the tax due at vesting. That's an option too. So if you said, hey, I get granted 50 shares, my tax rate is 20%, I want to withhold 10 of those shares in order to pay the taxes, you could do that. So that is an option as a way to pay taxes. Different thing is the stock option. So now the restricted stock unit, you got the stock, you own the shares of stock, whether it goes up or down. A stock option is the opportunity in the future to purchase the shares of stock or just sell them outright above a certain strike price. So in this case, we'll use that $50 price again. If the stock is 40 and your strike price is 50, it's worthless. You don't do anything with that stock option. If you were granted it at 50 as your strike price and the stock is now 60, now it's $10 in the money, you would want to take advantage of that. So you're buying the stock directly from the company. Again, vesting periods are similar, often over 4 years. If the employment terminates for any reason, the options that are unvested expire. If you have vested stock options, but you have not turned them into shares, in other words, you have not exercised them, you usually have 90 days post any kind of employment termination to make a decision as to whether you want to sell those options or you want to turn them into stock that you'll choose to hold. Why is the benefit? You're sharing in the company's growth without any risk of your own money. It was a tax-free grant. So if you exercise, that's when it becomes taxable, but the grant itself is tax-free. The expiration of the stock option is typically 10 years, as long as you remain employed that long. You are subject to any compliance with company's insider trading policies, and it gives you the opportunity to buy the shares of stock at a price that's fixed on the grant date. Many companies, tech employees typically, have become very wealthy through the use of stock options over the last 2 decades. Once the stock option expires, you would lose the right to actually exercise the shares. You can only, similar to the RSU, you can't do anything with it until it's vested. So if the stock ran up in the first year, you still can't do anything with it. So you can't take advantage until it's become vested. And then you would obviously, as I mentioned, want to have the fair market value of the stock be above your strike price. Your strike price is 50, your stock's at 40, it's a worthless option. You don't do anything with it. Your strike price is 50 and the stock is 60. You could potentially take advantage and sell that at that time. So talked about it. RSUs is that promise to issue you the company stock and you own the shares no matter what. The stock option is going to give you the option to choose whether you want to take advantage of owning that company stock in the future or not. All right, the one question that we did not answer that I saw in the chat was around inflation and taxes. Someone said, wouldn't I necessarily want to pay my taxes later in terms of retirement deferral? Well, if inflation is high, the government may very well need more money to pay their debts as well. So tax rates may go higher. So that's always the question. Now, 10 years ago, people probably would have told you, oh, taxes can only go higher. They were wrong, they got lower. But right now, the marginal tax rate, give you an idea, in 1974, the marginal tax rate was 60%. The marginal tax rate now is about 30%. So if you were to, and we have $30 trillion in debt now as a country, if you were to ask me to make a bet, I'm betting tax rates go up over time, but all you can do is, it is a little bit of a guess right now. So that would be my thought on, is it necessarily better to pay taxes later because of inflation? I'm not sure of that. So, but your tax rate is likely lower because you're not working. So that's why I say get the money to work, get it pre-tax, let it grow as fast as you can, unless you're getting that max. If you get to the maximum contribution level of that $20,500 a year, $27,000 if you're over the age of 50, because they allow that catch-up contribution, then you want to start thinking about the Roth. That's my personal opinion. And again, happy to talk to anyone on an individual basis if that would be helpful. I do not see any other questions, right? Oh, I do. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. No, we answered that. The tax investing, and again, it's that we did answer that. All right. So I thank everybody for their time. Dan, thank you so much for being our guest. I
Thank you.
hope that you really enjoyed the webinar, and please feel free to join us in 2 weeks for our July webinar on long-term care insurance and things you should be thinking about. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.